The merry bubble and joy, the thin, clear, happy call of the distant piping. Such music I never dreamed of, and the call in it is stronger even than the music is sweet. For the music and the call must be for us.
I really love you, and I mean you. The star above you, crystal blue. Well, oh baby, my hair's on end about you.
Syd Barrett was one of the most unique talents to surface from the 1960s underground music scene. His dramatic rise to stardom and mysterious, untimely departure from public life is now the stuff of folklore. Underneath his erratic charms is a body of work and a personality that has made his legacy live on, even though Barrett himself has been conspicuously absent.
There's no doubt that genius is madness. It's a type of abnormality that a lot of people never relate to. Does Syd Barrett fit into being a genius? I would say absolutely. Extraordinarily gifted songwriter and a very talented musician.
In his music, it didn't follow, I mean, even the simple songs, they don't really follow straight path of other songs.
You warm to him, really. Whatever the song, or whether it's some silly song like Bike or Jug Band Blues or Octopus, whatever he's singing about, you're drawn to him. He's a very attractive kind of personality.
This film is an exploration of Syd Barrett's short recording career and the music that made him famous.
On end about you.
Five, 4, 3, 2. All engines running. Launch commenced. Liftoff. We have liftoff.
Amidst the advancements and turbulence of the mid-1960s, British popular music was going through an important change. Leading bands like the Beatles were starting to adapt their American R&B influences and move in an entirely new musical direction. As the West Coast hippie movement began to take hold on youth culture, a young psychedelic band led by art student Syd Barrett began to emerge from the London scene. They became known as the Pink Floyd.
The story goes, Syd comes into college one day, says, right, I've got a name for the band, Pink Floyd. And supposedly this comes from an old blues LP, which in the liner notes it mentioned two, I think, Carolina blues guitarists called Pink Anderson and Floyd Council.
Syd Barrett's influences are very hard to track down because he remains unique and individual as an artist. But you can hear certain things. There was obviously...
And Zappa, they're people who really stand on their own. And I think you can see a lot of that in what Syd did.
The group had begun by playing R&B covers, but it was through their live performances that their sound really began to develop.
They were playing gigs and basically to cover their own sort of, not lack of ability, that's the wrong word, but they found them, you know, they used to sort of do long, weird sort of freakouts in the middle of numbers. So they'd be doing a straightforward number like Louie Louie, bog standard R&B song, and then they put this huge improvised sort of splurge in the middle, basically. And the psychedelic thing for Pink Floyd evolved out of that.
They became the kind of house band, really, for this burgeoning counterculture. Drugs were part of it as well. Poetry, music, all these forms of creative expression, and with this sort of challenge to the existing mores and conventions of the day.
A lot of people in the British psychedelic movement in the 60s had grown up with the R&B boom, with the Mersey beat and so forth, the sound that really defined pop at the beginning of that decade. But as the decade wore on, they suddenly began to realise there's more to music than just strictly 3-minute, happy, verse, chorus, songs in the charts. And once they realised that, everything began to take off.
Quickly attracting the management of Pete Jenner and Andrew King, Pink Floyd became increasingly successful on the new London Underground. They became a regular feature at the legendary UFO Club on Tottenham Court Road. It was here that they met Joe Boyd, who agreed to produce the group's first record.
Suddenly there was a lot of interest came through very quickly. People wanted to book them, and record labels were starting to sort of approach them. They had Joe as a producer because they knew him, he was a mate, and he knew Sound Technique Studios. And so they went into Sound Techniques and did the 2 recordings, Arnold Lane and Candy and a Currant Bun. The story is it was originally recorded as a demo tape to tout around the record company.
I mean, in a way, perhaps it couldn't. It's a 3-minute single. I mean, the other side of the Floyd was the 20-minute space jams when everybody's high on LSD. To compress what they do into a 3-minute single, I think it's a remarkable piece of work, actually.
Arnold Lane was the first hit single for the Pink Floyd. It fitted into what was going on at the time, and it didn't fit into what was going on at the time. There was a certain darkness and eeriness and eccentricity to it. It had a...
Arnold Lane is a totally non-threatening character. Okay, he takes bras and knickers off washing lines, but there's no suggestion that he's some kind of evil predator playing on young girls or anything like this. There's a kind of innocence about it. Interestingly, the story is that it's very much rooted in real experience, and Syd Barrett's mother, and I think maybe Roger Waters' mother, at home in Cambridge, let rooms to students, female students at the university, and so there was always this line of bras and knickers hanging in the back garden, and so the sort of seed...
Success, reaching number 20 in the UK charts. In contrast to more recent times, the Barrett of 1967 was every bit the pop star, fronting many live performances and even appearing on television.
Syd Barrett was a pop star for a while. He fronted the band, and he was obviously very happy doing that. He had real stage presence. I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen that bit of footage of them on Look of the Week doing Astronomy Domine with the sort of flailing arms and all that sort of thing. He certainly had that side to him, this sort of limelight-seeking, centre of attention kind of side.
Why has it all got to be so terribly loud? For me, frankly, it's too loud. I just can't bear it. I happen to have grown up in the string quartet, which is a bit softer. So why has it got to be so loud, so amplified?
Well, I don't guess it has to be, but I mean, that's the way we like it. And we didn't grow up with a string quartet, and I guess that could be one of the reasons why it is loud. And it doesn't sound terribly loud to us.
Yes, actually, not everybody who hasn't grown up in a string quartet turns into a loud pop group, so your reason is not altogether convincing. But I accept that you like it. What I'm saying is that if one gets immune to this kind of sound, one may find it difficult to appreciate softer types of sound. Syd, yes? No?
I don't think that's so.
No.
I mean, everybody listens. We don't need it very loud to be able to hear it, and with some of it is very quiet, in fact.
Right.
Personally, I like quiet music just as much as loud music. We play in large halls and things where obviously volume is necessary, and when people dance, they like volume, comes in on its own, but...
Barrett's next composition, See Emily Play, was to further establish him as a pop star. However, the record did not start out with such ambitions.
See Emily Play started as a song called Games for May, which is a line in the song. And that was written for an event on the South Bank in London at the Festival Hall called Games for May in May 1967, which was perhaps the first time the so-called underground came, if not overground, a little bit more into the public focus. But it was the first major sort of visible coming together of the tribes, if you like, that represented the London underground scene at that point. So that's how the song started. And then it developed from Games for May into See Emily Play.
Emily tries but misunderstands. She's often inclined to borrow somebody's dreams till tomorrow. There is no other day. Let's try it another way. You'll lose your mind and play free games for me.
Well, See Emily Plays was, I suppose, the height of Syd Barrett's pop songwriting period with Pink Floyd. It was certainly their biggest hit. It got to number 6 in the charts, and it was a real classic pop song. And of course, with all Syd Barrett songs, there's always a line that kind of stands out and grabs your attention.
Emily tries but misunderstands. She's often inclined to borrow somebody's dreams till tomorrow.
See Emily Play was the biggest hit that the Syd Barrett era Floyd ever had. Now, Syd himself always maintains after a gig one night he fell asleep in the woods after a really heavy trip, woke up and saw this girl in the distance playing the Emily of the song. Now, I find this a little hard to believe because the original title of the song was Games for May. So why on earth was it then changed to See Emily Play? So it's very possible that never happened. It's also possible it was a dream sequence, or there's a third story, which is the fact that there was someone hanging around with the Floyd at the time who was very intimately involved with the band, and they actually changed her name to Emily to protect her.
See Emily Play, obviously a lot more psychedelic than Arnold Lane. You've got the sort of wacky guitar solos all over it, and the plastic ruler being scraped down the neck of the guitar, and then sort of noises and that sort of thing. I suppose See Emily Play, it's the best sort of encapsulation of what the Floyd were about at that time, because they have it's a pop song, but at the same time it's a bit of a soundscape.
Much more of the sort of psychedelic vibe that perhaps had been lacking from the first single, Arnold Lane, and dipping even more deeply into this English whimsy, which was very, very strong and very influential at the time.
See Emily Play became a huge chart success. The hype that the record created led to eager anticipation about the group's first LP. However, the album's title was to become somewhat of an issue.
The original working title for the album, that's the job file, was Projection. There's a few adverts for Arnold Lane, which if you look in the magazines and so forth from the time, they talk about the next projected sound for '67. So they were obviously, the record company was sort of thinking along those lines for publicity. But fairly late in the day, it was Peter Bound said to me, Syd just sort of came up one day and said, I think we want to use this title, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which he'd got from it's the odd chapter out in Wind in the Willows. When you read the Wind in the Willows, there's this strange chapter which doesn't follow the narrative flow.
So I was thinking, murmured the rat, dreamful and languid, dance music, the lilting sort that runs on without a stop, but with words in it too. It passes into words and out of them again. I catch them at intervals. Then it is dance music once more, and then nothing but the reeds, soft, thin, whispering. You hear better than I, said the mole sadly. I cannot catch the words. The title very much reflects the importance of that innocent, childlike vibe that Flower Power had. We're talking the summer of 1967 here. It was the Flower Power summer.
Piper at the Gates of Dawn was released in August 1967, the height of the Summer of Love. The record is one of Britain's few psychedelic masterpieces and still has a resonance almost 40 years later.
I still find Piper at the Gates of Dawn to be a very impressive creation. And we're talking about a record that was made nearly 40 years ago. It still stands. No question about that at all.
For me, Piper at the Gates of Dawn remains the finest work Pink Floyd ever put together. It's a remarkable album. Now, I'm not knocking what they did post Syd Barrett with Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, The Wall. These were wonderful, magnificent pieces of work. But what made Piper at the Gates of Dawn stand apart from so much at the time was that it was eccentric, it was significant, it was eloquent, and all these were combined through Syd Barrett, who was a conduit for so much that was going on, so much that was dark, so much that was almost unnerving and a little bit difficult to comprehend. The prime example to me is a song called The Bike on there, which seems a little bit fairy tale, a little bit happy-go-lucky, a little bit Watch Your Mother, if you will. But if you get deep into the roots, and what you're actually hearing and listening to is a man opening up his psychosis, opening up his psychology, opening up his disturbed yet quite brilliant mind.
I've got a bike, you can ride it if you like. It's got a basket, a bell and rings and things to make it look good. I'd give it to you if I could, but I borrowed it. You're the kind of...
I've got a bike, you can ride it if you like. It's got a bell that rings and things to make it look good. But again, I mean, almost like a nursery rhyme, you know, so we cannot underestimate the importance of this sort of fairy, childlike world that at that time hallucinogenic drugs were associated with.
I've got a cloak, it's a bit of a joke. There's a tear up the front, it's red and black, I've had it for months. If you think it could look good, then I guess it should. You're the kind of girl that fits in with my world. I'll give you anything, everything, if you want things. I know a mouse and he hasn't got a house, I don't know why I call him Gerald.
Yes, apart from being a fun, quirky song, Bike also has this extraordinary construction. So you get points where it seems to be slowing down at the end of each verse, or the lyrics and the structure of it break up in unexpected ways. So you can't really predict which way Syd is going to sing next. But it's got that kind of oblique, sort of unpredictable air about the whole piece, which makes it all the more intriguing, all the more fascinating.
For me to listen to it, it's almost a bit uncomfortable, really. I mean, you've got that mad sound collage when he goes off into the room of musical tunes, which is very strange. And I remember the first time I heard it, I remember thinking, woo, you know, what's happening here? You know, you've got all these groovy, almost pop songs and the psychedelic stuff, and then it closes the album with this. In a way, it's you've got a simple song, but it's with an oddly nursery rhyme type subject. But in a way, it can be it's unsettling.
Another song on the album, Interstellar Overdrive, had long been a firm live favourite of the band's and was one of the songs that had earned them their psychedelic reputation.
Of course, their anthem in a way. It was the piece that people went to hear them play at all the underground clubs. You expected them to get the lights show operating, and the Binson Echo Drive was very important on that too, because that was a little device that gave Syd Barrett the appropriate echo effects on his guitar. Being a 9-minute instrumental, it gave all of the group an opportunity to improvise, jam. It came up with a kind of soundscape, really. It was painting with music.
Interstellar Overdrive really came out of that, that need to create these sort of improvisational, experimental pieces in that live environment. In fact, Pete Jenner tells the story that Interstellar Overdrive first took shape when he was humming to Syd the tune of, I think it was My Little Red Book by Arthur Lee and Love, and Syd picked up the guitar and started copying the sort of descending riff as Pete was humming it. But then from that very simple structure, they created this elongated piece of sort of space rock, as we called it.
And Interstellar Overdrive itself, which is almost, let's go, let's just let our instrumental imagination run riot, again, holds your attention enraptured because it has such a fascinating pull, a magnetic pull to its center. You're driven towards the center of that whole journey, when Interstellar Overdrive is a journey. And at the end of it, you feel drained and you feel that you're lost, but somehow extraordinarily exalted.
By the time Piper at the Gates of Dawn was released, Barrett's well-documented mental problems were beginning to become a serious issue for the Pink Floyd. Syd's behaviour was becoming increasingly erratic, and after a disastrous American tour, it was clear that something had to change. However, Syd's condition has, in recent years, been the focus of some debate.
It's very easy to say that Syd Barrett was an acid casualty. But on the other hand, a lot of other people took LSD without having sort of psychotic breakdowns or whatever. So, I mean, it's become pretty clear over the years that there was already a schizophrenic condition there, and clearly these drugs will accentuate that. On the other hand, I mean, there's no doubt he was taking absolutely colossal quantities of LSD.
The interesting thing about Syd Barrett is the sheer amount of things that you read about him that contradict each other. I mean, he's gone down in history as this bloke who was sort of fried on acid the whole time. But more recently, these interviews have come out with people who he lived with who think that probably you could count on two hands the number of times he took acid during 1967. I mean, obviously Syd had his problems, but I don't think it was down to that. I mean, he smoked copious amounts of weed, and I don't think the effect of that could be underestimated. You know, he became very paranoid and very much in his own little bubble, and you know, you could perhaps partly attribute it to that. He also took a lot of mandrax, which very, very sort of powerful, I suppose you could say it was a sedative. What that actually was that happened to him, I think it's very hard to say. I mean, I think that's why people find him so fascinating.
Despite Syd's deteriorating condition, the group did manage to release a third single, the Barrett-composed Apples and Oranges.
Flip-top, cracking cigarettes in the pocket, feeling good at the top, shopping at shops, walking in the sunshine town, feeling very cool. With the butchers and the bakers and the supermarket stores, getting everything she wants from the supermarket store. And oranges, and oranges.
It's certainly a lot less carefully packaged than See Emily Play. It was a product of months of trying to, sort out the follow-up hit and failing. Again, I think it's an example of the kind of pressures that Syd was under at the time.
It was recorded around about November '67, which was getting towards the end of Syd's time with the group anyway. And so, they were scratching it. They needed a single to come out. There were all sorts of financial pressures on the band, and Syd was feeling the pressure, perhaps not coming up with the songwriting in the way he did before. But they put this one together. But they needed to get a record out for Christmas, as Syd actually said in an interview. It's a chirpy song with a touch of Christmas about it.
As so many of his songs were, actually rooted in real life and what he saw around him. The story is he saw this girl shopping in Richmond one day and he wrote this song about it. And it's quite prescient because, there's that line in there about she's getting everything from the supermarket. So he's actually seeing the breakdown of that traditional English high street, the butchers, the bakers and the candlestick makers. Now it's all in the superstore, the supermarket. But it's not a great song, certainly as a single, and you can see why it didn't chart.
Syd's not Eric Clapton. He's not one of those sort of guitar players, but he creates some great sounds. He's like John Lennon, not a red hot lead guitarist, but boy, he could make it talk, the guitar, when he wanted to. But Apples and Oranges, it's this amazing wah-wah riff that drives it, and it ends on this sort of feedback where it's all the way through. He's playing this wah-wah guitar, and he's just holding back the feedback until right at the end, and then it just sort of the song fades out on that feedback.
By the tail end of 1967, Syd's increasingly erratic behaviour became too much of a burden for the rest of the group to bear. Syd's status within Pink Floyd began to drastically alter.
There were these stories of him standing on stage all night and playing one note with his back to the audience. You can see how it became hugely infuriating for the rest of the group. And they decided that they couldn't go on like this. And there had been a series of gigs where he hadn't turned up at all, and Davey O'List from The Nice had depped on guitar. Something had to give. And there were various plans. The Floyd's management had one notion, which was that Syd could become a kind of Brian Wilson figure. That is, not go on the road with them, not appear on stage with them, and, frankly, fuck the gig up every single night, but hopefully could still provide the material, write the songs in the way that Brian Wilson was at that stage doing with the Beach Boys.
The band wanted to keep him on board, and they went through this period where, when David Gilmour joined, around about December '67, and the announcement in the press were he was to help broaden their sound or take it in new directions, though what they really needed at the time was somebody who could play guitar reliably. And do singing and stuff like that. And Syd was still going to be the songwriter. This seems to be what they were saying. So they ended up with this strange period for half a dozen gigs at the beginning in 1968 where you have both David Gilmour and Syd Barrett in the band. They did try it with Syd and David Gilmour together. But again, that didn't work out. And there's the famous story where they just decided for one gig where they weren't going to bother to pick him up. And that was it. They went on to do all the various Pink Floyd things they did, but the upshot of it all was after January '68, Syd was on his own.
After the split, Barrett initially retired from the public eye. However, there was to be a peculiar and haunting epitaph to Syd's departure. On Pink Floyd's second LP, Saucerful of Secrets, released after Syd had left the group, the band decided to include the Barrett-composed Jug Band Blues.
I'm most obliged to you for making it clear that I'm not here. And I never knew the moon could be so big, and I never knew the moon could be so blue. And I'm grateful that you threw away my old shoes and brought me here instead, dressed in red. And I'm wondering who could be writing this song.
It's a song written by a bloke who seems to be acknowledging what's happening to him. You know, I'm wondering who could be writing this song. And perhaps in Jug Band Blues you've got a man acknowledging he's not very happy with the way things are at that particular time.
Jug Band Blues, it gets held up as this sort of cast iron proof that Syd was crazy. I think certainly it's evidence that he wasn't happy. You know, it's a very downbeat, possibly slightly angry song in some ways. I think it's a very carefully worked out piece. I don't think he was just making it as he went along. You know, I mean, there's a version of it in circulation from the BBC session from a few months later, and it sounds exactly the same. It's the exact same structure and the exact same lyrics. You know, so I don't think it was a random outpouring. I think it is actually a very carefully constructed piece of work. Unhappy, and perhaps it's obviously a fragmented track. It's got all these funny little bits and pieces in it, and perhaps, yeah, he was trying to. That was meant to be an expression of his state of mind, that he was feeling a little bit all over the place.
You've got this Salvation Army band that suddenly appears out in the middle of nowhere in it, which is great. I mean, they had good fun trying to record that, apparently. But the story goes, you know, when they came in and they wanted to know what to play, Syd just said, "We'll play anything," which sounds, you know, you can go back and say, "Whoa, that's pretty spooky and psychedelic and far out." But when you think about it, what you've got is it's sort of. You've got this surreal section in the middle, and it's like the band are in, you know, the Salvation Army band are almost like suddenly flying in from another place and being in there. So in that context, I suppose, you know, if you're Syd Barrett and you're writing you've got a song, and he wasn't bothered about what they were going to play. He just wanted the Salvation Army band playing.
It's a haunting song, really, Jug Band Blues, because that awareness of what's happening to him is quite scary in a way. I mean, it must have been a very hard burden to bear. You know, it's almost better if you're cracking up, if you're breaking up like that. It's almost better to know that it's not going on than to be so acutely aware that you're falling apart. And yet, having these flashes of lucidity in which you can actually describe the process of falling apart.
And the sea isn't green, and I love the Queen. Then what exactly is a dream? And what exactly is a joke?
After leaving Pink Floyd at the beginning of 1968, Barrett had remained silent. After some abortive recording sessions with Peter Jenner in May, it wasn't clear if Syd Barrett was going to pursue a solo career at all.
Malcolm Jones, who was head of Harvest Records at the time, just got a call from Syd Barrett one day saying he wanted to come into, you know, to do some more recording. But Syd came back in and played a few numbers for Malcolm Jones, and, you know, there were things like Opal and Swanley and whatever that you know, and Malcolm Jones felt it was good, you know, it was strong enough to do the album. And from then on, there was this fairly leisurely process where Malcolm Jones was producing, and they you know, Syd would do just very basic backing tracks with him and his the black Telecaster he had at the time, And they didn't plug it in, they just mic'd it up and used it as like an acoustic guitar. And when you look through the recording sheets, there's this sort of 6-month period where they're fiddling with the various songs and adding bits and pieces, and just things are slowly starting to take shape.
During this process, it was decided that several of the new recordings needed a band behind them. Barrett eventually approached a contemporary psychedelic group, Soft Machine, and invited them to guest on the new album.
We were playing in the 100 Club in Oxford Street in London. Anyway, after this gig, outside, Syd appeared. He'd been in the gig, and he knew Robert and Mike anyway from earlier days, although I'd never met him before. And he just kind of muttered, would you like to come and play on this record I'm doing? It was kind of very vaguely suggested. So we said okay. And so it was arranged for a couple of months later. Syd definitely didn't want session musicians, which we weren't anyway, so that was not a problem. So I guess he'd heard something when we played live, something about, I suppose, the power or the sounds, which, I mean, at that time, Soft Machine were quite weird at that time, and we were doing written pieces, but I mean, we were doing it quite heavily with heavy sound. So I guess he felt that he automatically heard something which he thought would fit the ambience of his music, and I think that's right. I mean, he wasn't trying to be control freak and have everything delineated as it should be. I mean, or as anyone else would. He was thinking more in terms of atmospheres, I think, and kind of feelings. So I mean, the sound of Soft Machine probably fitted at that time, fitted into his songs. When we got to Abbey Road Studios, Syd had got some demos, just voice and guitar, which we'd never heard before, and he had absolutely no suggestions for us what we should do. So we had to sit down in this very expensive studio and learn these tunes as we were going, and playing along with them, starting again. And we did our usual thing, lots of fuzz bass, fuzz organ, and Robert thundering away on drums. And we were kind of halfway to learning them, because I mean, they're not very easy songs. I mean, they're not difficult songs, but they're not symmetrical. So you might have 4 bars of this and half a beat there, and 3 bars maybe, and then it changes. So we had to learn this, and then after a couple of hours of each song, we'd had a go at this, and Syd came in and said, "Yeah, that's fine, yeah," and that's it. He was happy, although we felt we hadn't even learnt the songs. He felt that it was something which was okay for him, for the atmosphere of the tunes. So that was it.
I don't know whether they ran out of money or EMI was starting to question the length of time that the sessions were taking. But the generally agreed version of the story is that after this sort of leisurely 6-month period of sessions where Malcolm Jones was producing, Syd was given like 2 days to finish the album. 2 days of recording to finish the album. So there's one day, and I think it's David Gilmour and Syd doing Octopus, as we were talking about earlier, plus Golden Hair, which were tracks that Syd had tried recording in '68, but had ended up, the recordings from there were very, very loose. David Gilmour got different versions from Syd. He pushed Syd to come up with much tighter versions of both recordings. So that's one day, and the second day Roger Waters came in as well to help us producing, and it was literally Syd laid down half a dozen tracks, Dark Globe and If It's In You, and a few like this. That whole sequence on side 2 of Madcap Laughs, where they've joined 3 or 4 songs together, and you can hear Syd chatting in the studio, and he has the false starts and various bits and pieces. All that was done on one day. And then there's a day when David Gilmour comes in and mixes everything, even all the Malcolm Jones ones and all the stuff that he'd recorded in the last 2 days. Then there's a day where Syd and David Gilmour decide what the track's going to be, and that's it, that's the album. So you've got like half the album's created in this leisurely 6-month sort of, very laid-back atmosphere, and then you've got 2 days of frantic activity creating the other half.
With the album complete, EMI prepared to release what became Syd Barrett's final ever single, Octopus. However, in recent years, the lyrical content of the song has been re-examined.
Your wings in a ghost tower, sails cackling at every break. Cracked by scattered needles, little mini gun coughs and clears his throat. Madam, you see before you stand. Hey ho, never be still. The old original favourite grand. Grasshoppers Green Herbarian Band, and the tune they play is an Askin pie.
When you first look at the lyrics to Octopus, you sort of think, where on earth? Well, what's he writing about here? This is really wacky stuff. And what it transpires, what he's done, he's taken a whole load of lyrics from poems. There's one called The Old Man on the Border, which contributes a lot of the cracked by scattered needles and The Old Man on the Border that crops up in the lyrics. And there's another one about the Grasshoppers Band, and that's where all that Grasshoppers Green Herbarian Band business comes from.
And they're all sort of quoted from things like things like Edward Lear and things like Green Grow the Rushes Ho and that sort of thing. The Man on the Border, that's certainly from one of Edward Lear's limericks, I think.
Syd just seems very comfortable with that. I mean, he's created a great backdrop. I mean, it's a really strong song, Octopus. I mean, initially, when they first put the running order together for the Madcap Laughs, that was going to be the opening song. So they later switched the sides around. But it's a really strong song, hence the fact it came out as a single. And Syd, again, as the songwriter, he seems comfortable enough. Well, I like that, I'll take a bit of that on. And he stitches them all together in a way that just works.
Madcap Laughs was released to substantial success in January 1970. However, elements of the album's production seemed to be in direct contrast to what Syd had done previously with Pink Floyd.
Well, in many respects, the Madcap Laughs, I suppose, was the first underproduced album. Whereas up to that point, people, for example, the Beatles, had been desperately trying to, with the help of people like George Martin, were trying to produce ever more polished and imaginative and orchestrated and cleverly arranged albums, using all the tricks of the studio as well. Session musicians brought in at the drop of a hat. So. But what you got with the Madcap, really, although there were attempts to use effects, mainly you're just getting raw Syd, and you're getting pauses and mistakes and fluffs.
It does have a very sparse sound. There aren't these sort of swirling psychedelic effects and that sort of thing. Why is that? I don't know. I mean, Syd seems to have called it a day with the sort of weird echo units and that sort of thing after Pink Floyd. I mean, maybe what he was trying to say was that really it's the songs that are important. I mean, that was what he'd been doing before Pink Floyd, He had his little folder of songs and he'd play his acoustic guitar to people at parties and that sort of thing. And I think there's some interview quote where he says, well, yes, it's just the same as it's always been. It's just me and an acoustic guitar getting the songs done.
And perhaps it was the only way that he could work by that stage. But it is very interesting that just as recording is going high-tech and, 4-track didn't come in until the kind of mid-60s, and then 8-track and 16-track and 32-track. And this is stripped down and raw, and years before anybody had invented the term lo-fi, or people were making records in their bedrooms or any of that, this record is pointing the way, really. So the way it sounds is just quite extraordinary and completely out of step with almost anything else at the time.
I really love you, and I mean you. The star above you, crystal blue. Well, oh baby, my hair's on end about you.
Terrapin, again, is what we were saying before about it being a very sparse, quite minimalist sound. You've got him strumming on his Telecaster with what we can only assume is a very thin, flippy plectrum, because you can hear it hitting the strings louder than you can hear the sound of the strings themselves. You have this sort of sound. It's again, it's one of those songs where it's just got such great imagery. These sort of little underwater, little vignettes, you know, sort of, again, which don't quite make sense in a literal kind of way. You've got these sort of phrases sort of bumping into each other, you know, sort of floating, bumping noses, dodger tooth, the fins are luminous.
Floating, bumping noses, dodger tooth, their fins are luminous. Fangs all round, a clam is dark below the boulders, hiding all the sunlight's good for us.
When Syd Barrett did the Madcap Laughs, I think there was a genuine feel on there that what he was doing was allowing his imagination to flow, to take hold. It was as if he was saying, I have this imagination, I don't understand whether it's a part of me or not, but I'm going to let it go. The prime example for me is Terrapin, the opening track of the album. It's got a state of real unnerving dream. It's a definite dream state on the record. You listen to the flow of the words, and what he seems to be doing is just laying back and letting it happen. He was capturing it rather like someone made fish, taking it out of the water and then throwing it down on pieces of paper and then seeing what he had at the end.
Another element of the album's production has been the cause of much debate over the years since its release. On the second side of the LP, several tracks contain false starts and imperfections that for many only add to the record's charm.
Yes, I'm thinking. Yes, I'm thinking. Look, you know, I'll start again. I'll start again. It's just the fact, you know, of going through it. I mean, if we could cut.
David Gilmour's describing it in an interview. He said they wanted to give an idea of what was actually going on in the studio. I'm not sure quite what was going through their heads at the time, but when you look at the recording box, it's quite specific. The instructions are that it must be left like this. It's not a case of it was done accidentally or they didn't want to tidy it up or something. It was quite specific. They wanted to leave that section in as it was. And my reaction when I first heard the album wasn't, wow, listen to all that page turn. This is strange. It was just like almost like a jokey bit of fun. You know, here's an artist admitting admitting their foibles, and you know that he makes mistakes and he has trouble singing sometimes. And it does work as a sequence. I mean, yeah, perhaps David Gilmour does regret it now. I don't know, but for me, it's an interesting bit of the album. And I think it works, and it works as a sequence. The way they have it on the album, it works, and I don't think there's any problem with it being included.
There's no doubt that the realism of the Madcap Laughs is like no other realism of the time. You have to remember we were living in an era where artistic integrity overtook everything else. Everyone was living in an unreal world. Suddenly Syd Barrett came along, who was Mr. Unreal for so many people, and did the Madcap Laughs, and what it has on the record are the false starts. It has that moments where things go wrong and it says, no, let's start again. It actually is a diary of the way the record was put together in the studio, which is quite remarkable because almost any other artist would have said, cut this out, cut that out, I don't want people to hear this. What Barrett said was, no, this is what the record is about. It's about the songs, but it's also about the moments when I get things wrong and what I learn through getting things wrong. And remarkably, it remained so underrated for several years after it came out. And suddenly the punk era came along, and what happened? The punk suddenly elevated Syd Barrett to a status that his erstwhile band, Pink Floyd, could never achieve with them because it was real. It was going straight to the heart. It was Syd Barrett, a voice and a guitar, saying, this is who I am, this is what I give you. And the punks took so much on board from that.
With Barrett doing hardly any promotion for the Madcap Laughs, sessions for a second solo LP started almost immediately in February 1970. However, these sessions were to be very different to those of the previous album.
Well, Madcap Laughs was a marginal success. At least it got Syd Barrett back working and showing that he really did want to create a solo career after leaving Pink Floyd. But I think people felt that he really needed a push to produce some work that was more organised for the second album. And this is where his old friend Dave Gilmour came into play.
Involved right from the start, and I think he went for a much more structured approach than perhaps Malcolm Jones had gone. Malcolm Jones, I think, had let Syd drive the process. I think Dave David Gilmour took a much more active producer's role. But again, I mean, they started off with just Syd and his guitar, and you talk to the engineers, and it was basically recording just tracks with Syd and an acoustic guitar, and then they overdub all the instruments on top of that. I think the difference this time around was that David Gilmour would push Syd more to try and get a best performance from it. I mean, you could say in a way he did, there are chunks of David Gilmour on that album rather than Syd Barrett, simply because, as he said, Syd had finished a number and that was it. He'd stop singing and that was it. He'd stop playing. So, he'd have to add, to finish a song off, he'd have to add a long fade out. And there's, at least one point on that album where, it's David Gilmour, Rick White and Jerry Shirley jamming in the studio just to finish give a reasonable fade out to something that Syd had created the basic structure for.
Even though the more rigid format of the Barrett sessions ensured that the record was released a mere 9 months after the Madcap Laughs in November 1970, it also stripped the record of some of the innovative features that had made Syd's first solo effort so unique.
Barrett is a much more lush, fleshed out sounding album. I think it's I think Dave Gilmour, who produced it, obviously made a real effort to make it sound like a real sort of finished product. I think he was maybe aware of the flaws that Madcap have. But I mean, I wonder if it went a little bit too far the other way.
It's trying too hard to be a conventional record that you might get played on the radio. That's the problem with it. I mean, there are flashes of great songwriting in there, but it doesn't have... And you have to be careful not to romanticize it and say the great thing about Madcap Laughs is because it is so mad and Syd is so out there. But in a way that is true. And when you try and confine that crazy genius into a more conventional format that, as I say, might even get you on the radio, I think you've got problems, and that's what you hear on that record.
For me, the second Syd Barrett solo album, Barrett, is not really about him. It's too focused, too commercial, too smooth. Yes, the songs are fabulous. Yes, it's probably better as a body of work than the Madcap Laughs. However, because other influences were being brought to bear, outside pressures from producers like Roger Waters, with Dave Gilmour, with Richard Wright, and Ian Mai's influence was there because they were running scared as to exactly what Syd Barrett was going to come up with if he was allowed just to reign free, as it were. So they imposed, and by imposing their own parameters and the parameters of the musicians he worked with, I think what you end up with is an album that's terribly disappointing.
Nonetheless, Barrett does contain some memorable and striking songs. Among them, Baby Lemonade, Gigolo Aunt and the enigmatic Dominoes.
Yeah, it's melancholic, but it's lovely. It's a great image. And You and I and Dominoes, I don't know who is it? Who's he talking to?
Certainly one of the most successful pieces off that album, for my money. It's such a simple song. I mean, I think that the actual verse, it's almost just all on one chord, and the backing, from despite what we were saying before about the production maybe being a bit questionable, I think it works very well on that particular one. Again, with the sort of the long drony organs and the sort of weird phasing on the drums, I think it's I think that's very very sort of sympathetic to the song.
Barrett was greeted with a lot less enthusiasm than the Madcap Laughs. After the album failed to chart, Syd retreated to the sanctuary of his hometown of Cambridge, and after several aborted attempts to perform and record, finally vanished from public life altogether. To this day, he lives a reclusive life in Cambridge, shunning press and having little to do with the music that made him famous. However, in his absence, his legend has continued to grow. It has been further fuelled by the appearance of several compilation albums containing previously unreleased material. One of the best loved of these rare tracks is Opal, which was made available in October 1988, a full 18 years after the release of his final album.
On a distant shore, miles from land, stands the ebony totem in ebony sand, a dream in a mist of grey. On a far distant shore, the pebble that stood alone in driftwood lies half buried. Warm shallow water sweeps shells, so the cockles shine.
Opal is a song that I feel represents one of the finest moments in Syd Barrett's songwriting and musicianship career, to call it musicianship career if you will. And one of the reasons is it's so unnerving and unpredictable. You never quite know what you're going to get. Even the title itself says nothing except, here's a song, just listen to it. Syd Barrett always had that ability to let his imagination run riot. And if he was allowed to do that, what he ended up with was a stream of consciousness that was almost to the point of being completely ridiculous, but yet strangely was focused, strangely was a raging storm with a sense of calm right at its centre.
Weird chords. I mean, whether that's just because his guitar was somewhat out of tune that day, I don't know. But these, it goes into this sort of long sort of instrumental section. You could almost sort of imagine a string quartet playing it, you know, these sort of desolate, long, drawn-out chords, and again, sort of, you know, more of that sort of wonderful imagery, you know, a dream in a mist of grey.
I mean, it's an amazing song. I mean, the imagery on a far distant shore, and it's one of those where it conjures up these amazing pictures. He was a craftsman. He was a great craftsman as a songwriter, and ultimately, I think that's what his legend rests on. It's his songwriting. You can hang all the other stuff on it as well if you want, but you strip all that away and you listen to the songs, and they're still great songs. And that to me is what Syd Barrett's about, and that is why people still talk about Syd Barrett and why people still buy his recordings and still listen to them.
I feel that the one album that Syd Barrett did with Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, plus his two solo albums, really encapsulate brilliantly what that man was all about in a certain sense of his life. 4 years, 3 albums, that's all it is, but it really does still capture the imagination, because this is Syd Barrett.
He was an extraordinary figure and an extraordinary songwriter who in a very brief period of time made a remarkable impact on English pop music.
But no answer came. He looked and understood the silence. With a smile of much happiness on his face, and something of a listening look still lingering there, the weary rat was fast asleep.
In the sad town, coal iron hands clap, the party of clowns outside.